Alrighty, so just through a couple quick intro things. As I'm sure you know by now, my name is Kara, and I am going to be your hub advisor this year. I'm the advisor for electrical, computer systems, and materials engineers to the class of 2024. I'm going into my third year advising all of these majors, so you all are near and dear to my heart at this point already. So just to explain a little bit about how advising works at RPI, we have what's called a dual advising structure. So what that means is in your first year on campus, I will be your primary person for all things academic. So if you need help moving your schedule around, if you want to talk about dual majors, minors, anything you can think of, I'm going to be your go-to person. Also, every spring that you're here, you're going to have something called a SAM hold. This stands for Student Advisor Meeting Hold, and it's basically RPI's insurance system of making sure that you check in with an advisor once a year and make sure you're on track. So for this first year, that meeting for us will be this spring, so you and I will meet then. And then for your remaining years at RPI, that'll be with your faculty advisor. So years 2 through 4, or longer if you have wild, wacky plans that keep you here longer, your faculty advisor will then become your main contact person. So they will be able to still help with academic advising questions like moving your schedule around or looking at a minor, but they will be able to bring in that expertise that I don't have in the sense that they have PhDs in your field. So when it comes to picking upper level electives that fit your interests or potentially connecting you with other faculty in the department who do research you might want to get involved in, they're going to be an excellent resource for that. Another person to put on your radar that you're very lucky to have in ECSE, her name is Rama, and basically she is a staff advisor like myself. It's her full-time job, only responsibility, and she will be your backup person sophomore through whatever year. So this basically means if there's a time where you need your faculty advisor and presenting at a conference or something like that, you're not in luck, you'll also be able to go to Rama. So there are a bunch of different people you can go to, and we all work pretty closely together. So if ever you aren't sure who to go to one of us and we'll be able to redirect you if needed. So that's a little bit about how advising works. So for the rest of this, I'm just going to quickly run through the registration guide. Obviously, I trust that you all can read and have read through it, but just kind of covering, if this were like a test for registration, what your study guide would be, the couple things I would want you to focus on night before as you prepare, and then running through the planning sheet, which we'll get to in a minute, obviously. So this hopefully should look familiar to you by now. This is your registration guide, and a few things we're going to point out here. So first is going to be your major template. So that's going to be pretty close to the top of the document, and this is a basic generic 4-year map of all the requirements to finish an electrical engineering degree. Now, the reason I point this out is because for a lot of students, one common mistake we see is if you are Googling and you do like RPI electrical engineering to try to find this, for whatever reason, it almost always defaults back to the 2008 catalog. So since these requirements can change year to year, it's important to make sure you're using the requirements for your specific class year. So since you guys are class of 2024, this will be your map throughout your time here. Now, one thing I do want to say is I rarely, if ever, see a student follow this completely lockstep. As you'll see throughout the guide and throughout our year together, there are countless little changes you can make along the way to tailor this to you. But it's helpful to have a starting place. And so just don't feel like you're limited. And if you're switching something, you've done something wrong. So save this in a safe place. I believe it's a JPEG in the registration guide, and PDFs are to come. Then moving along from there, there is a video here that I would highly recommend watching if you haven't. So this is planning your first semester. It's basically like a mini video advising session with myself. So it walks you through the template, talks about classes you'll definitely want to be taking in your first semester, some that you could consider taking, and then they will, it'll cover a lot of different test cases. It won't always cover absolutely everything, but it really should get most of the way there for you. Then moving along, sorry for the little pop-up from the VPN. So the transfer credit section is going to be really important if this applies to you. So if you're coming in with any sort of credits, whether it's exams like APs or IBs or college credits from other universities, understanding what you already have is critical to figuring out what you're going to take. So this section is going to walk you through all of that. Obviously, feel free to just pay attention to the parts that apply to you. So if you only have exam credits, this video is pretty quick and we'll walk you through that. If you weren't already aware, these are charts for each of the exam credit types, and they are clickable, so it'll blow them up and make them much, much easier to read. So that'll be for all the exams. They tend to be very straightforward to figure out. And then the part that's a little more tricky is if you're transferring credits from other colleges. So again, this video will walk you through all the ins and outs. It's a little less straightforward than the exam stuff, but nothing that you can't get through. And if you have a question on your credits, please just email me. It's not a problem at all. Then moving along, I would definitely spend some time and energy on trying to understand your Haas core. So as you probably know by now, Haas is RPI's general education requirements, and I highly, highly, highly recommend taking a Haas class in your first semester. It really provides some balance as you transition out of high school. As much as you probably love science, math, and technology based off of this being your major of choice, I still wouldn't do 4 heavy-hitting STEM classes in your first semester. So with that being said, the Haas requirements themselves are, honestly speaking, a little bit convoluted. They definitely play into each other. There are parts that can overlap and double dip. So definitely make the time to watch this video. It tells you everything you would need to know. And then that's going to help you strategize what you pick for the first semester. So anything in the video will have further links available below. So for example, something that's probably the biggest crux of your Haas is the integrative pathways. So this link will bring you to all of them, show you all of the information and details, and so on and so forth. Another great resource here is Haas is running their own webinars just to talk about these requirements, and they're not for Haas majors, they're for majors like you all, where you just want to understand those things better. So this button right here will take you to their webinar schedule. And then last thing I'm going to point out in the registration guide is the whole how to register section. So obviously this is very long and pretty tech heavy, but it'll take you step by step to figure out the main things you need to know. But if you're just trying to brush up before it all begins, again, the videos are going to be a good way to condense. So this video teaches you about YACS, which is the course visualizer, so to speak. So you type in all the classes you're planning to take, and it shows you every possible schedule you could have. So that is an extremely powerful tool when you know how to use it. Its one Achilles heel is it's not live in terms of knowing how many seats. So basically, in terms of knowing the time slots, perfect, use YACS to the fullest. But it's strongest when you use it in combination with SIS, which is the Student Information System, where you can get that actual live data. And the video will show you how to split your screen, use them both. Highly recommend it. And then this how to register video, obviously, I think you could understand why that's pretty important. And I would definitely watch the video to the end. I know it's a bit of a longer one, but there are some tips and tricks in there about troubleshooting any registration errors. And I would honestly say that I have sophomores who haven't figured some of that out yet. And it's really not difficult if you know where to look. So if you watch this video and can understand all of it, you are going to be like miles ahead of some of your peers, and it'll be great. So that's the main stuff I'd want you to focus on in the registration guide. Obviously, we have tons of good information that you will continue to be able to reference throughout your whole first year. But if you're looking for your study guide, cheat sheet, what do I do the night before registration, those 5 highlights would really be where I would focus my energy. So with that being said, one of the resources we have in here at the end is the electrical engineering worksheet, which is the planning sheet I'm going to take you through now. So just to kind of explain this, because I think it's probably the least self-explanatory part of the guide, the goal with this sheet is for you to end up with a full list of every single possible class you could take this fall. So just to give you a little bit of a sneak peek at my advising philosophy and strategy, the way I go through things is when we talk, we make a primary list of classes. So this is your plan A, everything went exactly the way I wanted it, and no concessions had to be made. And a lot of times plan A works, and that's great. But also, we always want to identify backup classes because sometimes things don't go right with plan A, right? So sometimes the section of a class you wanted is full and you'd rather switch it. Sometimes something is just full and out of seats, so we need to switch it. It's really no big deal when we have to go to backups, but we just want to make sure we know what they are so there's no panic when we're in registration. And on that topic of first choice classes, second choice, I would say any semester coming up where there's a class that you absolutely need to take that semester. And just to preempt this a little bit, for the fall for you all, I would say pretty much the biggest do or die is if you don't have Calculus 1, no negotiation, have to get that in there. And I would say Computer Science 1 is almost as important if you don't already have it. But things like ECSE and Haas, like if we're ending up on a backup class, no sweat. Those don't really impact your progression at all. And every semester you'll be able to talk with myself or your advisor at the time to identify what those important ones are and the ones that we can flex if needed. So just to walk through, as I mentioned, Computer Science 1 is going to be really important if you don't already have credit for it. If you do, great, just cross this class out and move on to the next. ECSE 1010 is something I cover in the major template walkthrough video, so I won't give you the whole spiel right now, but this is a really great option for your fall semester. However, it is absolutely something you could take in the spring. It's no big deal which semester you take it. I would say if you're kind of unsure if you want to be an ECSE, electrical or computer systems major, it could be good to either two different schools of thought here. So you could take this class, and I think it would be a good exposure to see if you like the major. And worst case, if you change majors, you could always use it as a free elective, which we'll talk about in a minute further down the sheet. But if you don't really want to take that little risk of using this as a free elective if you change your major, then your options are, again, you could push it off, or all engineering majors except the more general version of this class, which is Engineering 1100 or Intro to Engineering Analysis. So that's something you can consider. Reach out if you have questions. I would say your math class will probably be the most straightforward in terms of what you pick. So if you have no math credits, then obviously start at Calc 1. If you have credit for Calculus 1, then we'll want to move on to Calculus 2. And then if you have credit for both Calc 1 and 2, this is where you kind of have a choice, but I have a strong preference. So after having Calculus 2 credit, you can either take differential equations, which is Math 2400, or multivariable calculus, which is Math 2010. So Math 2400, whenever possible, take that first. Reason being, this is a prerequisite for electric circuits. Your professors will start telling you the week you get here, take circuits as soon as you possibly can. I have a slightly different take on that, but either way, I would always say get to differential equations as fast as you reasonably can so we can open up that path. Obviously, if you're in the place that you're able to take one of these in your first semester, you are far ahead and you're not going to fall behind if you don't. So if it just works better for scheduling purposes or something specific about your situation, multivariable calculus is absolutely on the table as well. Then we already covered Haas in your first semester. Highly recommend. You won't hear me recommend against it, but take a look at the guides for details on how to pick. Then moving along, there's a 1-credit class that you'll have to take sometime in this first year. That's going to be either Engineering Graphics and CAD, which is 1200, or Engineering Communications, which is 1400. I recommend Engineering Communications. Both courses are going to teach you how to use that CAD software, so you could still put it on your resume and get that experience. But Engineering Communications switches to Microsoft Office halfway through and gets a lot easier and less time consuming as a result. Based on your major, you will not use CAD enough at school and in life for me to feel like it's worth the extra stress for you to take 1200, but know that either one's an option. So you could do this fall if you'd like. You absolutely could wait till spring as well. Then physics is probably my favorite option to switch if you're thinking on waiting for ECSE 1010. Physics 1 is good to go at any time. If you have credit for Physics 1, you could consider taking Physics 2. If you're thinking about this, I would just make sure to consider the context of the other classes you're taking this fall. Physics 2 is known to be pretty heavy at RPI, so I would want you to have some physics experience, obviously, which you would have with Physics 1, and I wouldn't really want you to be in other lab classes because that would probably weigh you down a bit. Speaking of lab classes, another option you all have is your science elective. So as you can see with 7 and 8, we have the science elective and the math science elective because the department's really creative with naming things. But the science elective is more restrictive. So you have to pick one of the 3 classes lined out here, which is Intro to Chemistry, Intro to Biology, or Cell and Molecular Biology. Pretty much no one takes cell and molecular biology because it's just infinitely harder. So why would you do that? So chemistry and intro to bio are generally going to be what you pick. Then for your math or science elective, this is going to be a lot more flexible. So basically you can take any 4-credit class that your major didn't already require or use in either the math department or astronomy, biology, chemistry, geology, or physics. So this probably is something people tend to take a little bit later. However, there are definitely things you could take as early as first semester if you find yourself needing some backups. Then really getting down here, if you already have credit for Computer Science 1, 2 classes you could consider are Computer Components and Operations, ECSE 2610. That's going to be the first computer hardware class, and it's taught by a really wonderful professor. Students really seem to love that one. You also could consider Embedded Control or Engineering 2350. Again, students tend to find that pretty fun. It is 100% hands-on. You end up programming microprocessors, so all lab stuff, very little in the way of theory or studying. Well, I shouldn't say no studying, but you get the point. It's much more lab-based than theory-based. However, that class historically is known to be a little bit heavy. So this is really like, this will only be on your list, I would say, if you've truly just maxed out all your transfer credits and we're truly reaching for something. Then last thing on here is free electives. So as I mentioned before, this can kind of be a catch-all. I really like to think of it as your slots to have fun, because as engineers, your curriculum is very defined and you don't have a lot of chances to kind of venture out and try different things. So these are your chances to do that. So there are a lot of ways people go with this, and there's no right way. So one thing is, if you want to do a minor, this is probably where we're going to fit that in and use these slots to make that happen. You also can go completely haphazard. So let's say you're an engineering major, but in high school you loved painting and you played in orchestra. Cool, then we can take art and orchestra to fill the free electives. Probably the last thing we'll see sometimes is within electrical engineering and computer systems, one big department, they have optional concentrations that you can do. So it's nothing formal or official. They don't put it on your degree or anything, but on the ECSE website, I might as well show you this while we're at it. They do have basically just some lists that walk you through different electives to take based on your interests. So let's see if I could find it because it is buried a little bit, but let's see. Just as a recap of what I've done so far, I Googled RPI ECSE concentrations, clicked on the undergraduate programs, and then here it is, concentration areas. So again, you don't necessarily have to pick one, and you certainly don't need to worry about this right now. But if you already know there's something you're interested in and want to check out what classes might be available, so let's say you want to do robotics, you can click on it and it will tell you all sorts of recommendations. And this is going to be more classes than you would have to take in your senior year between things like lab elective, restricted elective. So if you just really love robotics in this case, you could use free electives to take a couple extra. So no wrong choice to be made there. Bringing it all back, I would say, for free electives, if you don't currently have a vision for what you want to do with those, then I would try to hold off. That way, if one emerges, whether it's a minor, a concentration, you haven't used those slots and they're there for you and available. However, if you already do have an idea, like you're coming in saying, hey, I'm an electrical engineer, but I want a minor in management, great. Then we might end up using one of those free electives as early as first semester, potentially, to take something like your intro class for management. So with that being said, at the end of all this, you should have a comprehensive list of every possible option, prioritize computer science and math, and the rest, and Haas just for quality of life, but from a graduation perspective, less do or die. And then from there, we can absolutely mix, match, and make things work. So with that being said, that is all I had to say. So now is really just about you all and your questions. So I'm going to go ahead and check the chat. Looks like we haven't gotten anything yet. So if there are any questions you want to ask, go ahead and type them in. If you'd prefer, there's not too many of you, so you're also welcome to just quickly pop yourself off of mute if you want to be brave and say it out loud. Either way works for me, so I'll give you some time.
Can you explain the Haas classes one more time?
Sure. So what part, just to clarify, what part, like in terms of picking them or what you have to take them for? Just want to make sure I answer the right thing.
Of picking them, because you said there's like 3 different paths to take for the Haas, and I'm confused on that.
Okay, sure. So hold on, let me actually do a screen share again because I think their web page is actually really great for this. So let me just set that up. Okay, there we go. All right, so basically, to quickly run through it, you all have to have 20 Haas credits, or at RPI, 5 Haas classes to graduate. Now, within those 5 classes, there are some different goals that we need to hit. So the biggest one, and the one that kind of gives shape to the rest of your decisions, is what's called an integrative pathway. So a pathway is a series of 3 classes clustered around a specific topic. So if you go to the Haas website, this will show you every possible option you have. So let's just look at one for an example. Let's go with environmental futures. So if you click on a dropdown, it will tell you a description of what the pathway is, why they made it, and then how to complete it. So they're all going to have a slightly different structure. And we can see for this one, for our first class in the pathway, I'd have to pick from this list. So there's all these different first-year classes you can take. You would just need to pick one. And then your last 2 classes to fulfill the pathway would just have to be from this list. So again, the Haas video goes into every possible piece, like the inquiry class, which are these IHSS ones, communication intensive classes, which are generally flagged as CI. I don't see any in this pathway, and not all pathways have CI classes, but that's okay because you have those 5 slots. Let me see if I could find one just so you can see what it looks like. Let's see. I'm sure I can find one. Let's go down to strategic writing. Of course, one of those will have to be comm intensive. Oh, okay. I think they just took it off the website entirely. Sometimes those things change, so I think they just didn't want anything to get updated. But again, the Haas video will show you how to find out what's communication intensive. So basically the reason I suggest starting here when you're trying to pick your Haas class for the fall is, as freshmen, you all are the only people who can take these IHSS classes. So as you're looking at them, it's really helpful to think, okay, if I know what pathway I want, then I can make sure to knock one of these out early on and set myself up for that pathway. Now, again, a pathway is 3 classes. You need 5 total for your Haas. So don't feel like it's a big deal if you got it wrong, quote unquote, and like took a class and figured out you didn't really like it enough to do a pathway. That's fine. We can absolutely course correct later, but just having a little bit of strategy on what pathway you might want will help you pick a class that best aligns with that for the fall. Okay, and then I see there's another question. Is it possible to dual major in computer systems and electrical engineering, or would that be too difficult to do in 4 years? Really good question. So it's absolutely doable and quite popular, actually. So I'm going to actually quickly pull up the dual template. I will caveat this by saying that the dual templates are usually updated by the departments late in the summer, so I will be showing you all the class of 2023 one. So obviously, if this is something that you plan to do, then you'll want to just make sure to check in for the updated one later. But again, just set up the share. So this is what the dual major looks like. So as you can see, it's very similar. Basically, the changes are that you would add in some programming classes. So you would have to take data structures, foundations of computer science, and intro to algorithms. And honestly, that's kind of it. I mean, also there's the computer engineering elective. So it throws in about an extra 4 to 5 classes. So as you can see, like, it's a little bit heavier, but certainly not too bad over the course of 4 years, especially if you're coming in with any sort of transfer credit, then you could pretty much eliminate the differences in credits from that alone. So I would say this is decently popular, but I would probably say I have 10 or less students do it a year, which is not to say it's a bad move, just that it's not always what people pick. But I would say of all the majors I advise, the most popular dual is computer systems, computer science. Electrical computer systems comes in second for popularity. So definitely doable in 4 years. And then some more Haas questions. So a Haas class is the same as IHSS. So good question. Let me pull something up that might help a little bit with that. So IHSS classes are a type of Haas class. To know what counts for Haas, again, I'm just going to share screen. Don't know why I keep bothering to turn it off. We're going to wait for Yaks to load real quick. And this will kind of be a good way to visualize what counts as a Haas. If it loads, it looks like it's not feeling very friendly today. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Slowly but surely. So basically, what we're waiting for is when this comes up, on the homepage of Yaks, you're going to see every college at RPI. So there's the School of Engineering, there's the School of Science, the Haas School. Any class from any department in the Haas School counts for a Haas course. So this doesn't seem to be loading. Let me think if I can get another good visualization. Let's see this. So don't pay attention to this for requirements. These are old requirements, but just for the sense of looking at different departments that can count for Haas, this is a big list. So like any class in any department in the Haas school will count towards the Haas core. So IHSS is one of many departments that count for Haas. And then I've looked at some of the Haas classes, but what does IHSS 19XX mean? Good question. So some of these inquiry classes, they do sometimes change number year to year just because a lot of them are new and rotating, so they don't always have a fixed number. So basically, if you see like an IHSS 19XX, that just means try to look for that class by the title. There's that link in the guide for the Haas inquiry classes for fall of 2020. So that can help you locate whatever class you were looking for and figure out what the number is for this fall. Good questions, guys. What else? Give it a little longer in case someone's typing. Okay, got another one. So, a couple more. So, are there specific dual major templates online? A wobbly yes. So, not every possible dual in the world is always online. I know like College of Science, for example, tends to keep a lot of them off the website, and you can always get them by talking to the science advisors. For engineering, I would say the most popular duals are available on the department websites. So some different ones that are popular, obviously, electrical and computer systems, computer science should be on ECSE's webpage, but obviously if you want one of those, just email me and I'll be happy to send it to you. You'll also be able to find a lot of dual majors with the main department, which is mechanical, aero, and nuke. So like aero mech, nuke, like all those will be online. Not every dual is possible. So like, for example, if you were trying to find a dual between like materials engineering and chemical engineering, no template exists because that's not an official dual. So some departments have these official ones that happen every year, like computer systems and electrical. It's not to say that the oddball ones can't happen, but that would mean we'd have to design a template. So the answer is for commonly established duals, some are online, for others, not so much. But if you have any specific one you're looking for, just email me and I'll definitely be able to help you hunt it down or create it. And then let's see. Oh, yay, more questions. Okay. Okay. One of them is, are there evaluations for some courses so we know how we fit the professor? Hmm. So at the end of every class you take at RPI, there are course evaluations that you can give feedback on your professor, the class, how it all went. I don't know that there's anywhere openly available for you to check that out. However, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of the website Rate My Professor, so that's always a good place to start. Obviously, I do give the small caveat that much like the normal online reviews, you tend to hear the extremes, so you tend to hear if people are really upset or people are really happy, and not so much in the middle. So it's a good place to look, but then again, just usual grain of salt. And then I tried to access Yaks today and it didn't seem to work. It didn't load. That happens sometimes. As you saw on my screen, it went pretty slowly. Another resource that has emerged in like the last week or so, because RPI students are endlessly creative, is there is a new website that just came out, I think is actually quite lovely to use, called Quacks. And basically it's like Yaks, but it has a couple of new features that I think are actually pretty cool. So for example, if you go over to this prerequisites thing and type in any classes that you already have credit for, so for example, let's see, import, that part we won't use. This looks like it might be a little buggy. Oh, hold on. Enable prereq checking. There we go. So like, let's say you have credit for Calc 1. You could add in all of your classes and then it'll understand what classes you do and don't have prereqs for. And for the general usage, it's very much the same as you would find for Yaks. So if Yaks won't work, try Quacks. Brand new. Some RPI students built it. Pretty cool. Okay. If the integrative pathways only have 3 courses, what would need to be done to add on those missing credits? Good question. So the answer depends on you. So if there is a Haas minor that you want to do, that's actually kind of a big point of the pathways, is that they set you up to complete, like a pathways 3 classes, most minors are 4. So with many of the pathways you're looking at, it can set you up to finish a minor with just 1 extra class. Actually, again, with the screen share on and off, let's pop over. So that's actually something you can see on that pathways page. So if you click on one, if it's compatible with any given minor, it's going to tell you at the bottom, just like this. So you can see obviously economics leads to econ, which is like not all that shocking. But for example, let's try to find a less obvious one. Let's see. So like logical thinking leads up to a specific type of philosophy minor. So that can be one way to pick some of those extra classes. And then otherwise, even if there's no minor you have in mind or no goal, then you really can just pick whatever you want. And with that being said, there are those requirements outside the pathway that I mentioned. So like everyone has to take an inquiry class, which are those IHSSs. Everyone has to take a communication intensive. So those things can happen in your pathway. And I know this is kind of confusing. So this is why I say watch the Haas video. It kind of breaks it down with visuals. But if you didn't get something done in your pathway, so let's say you did your econ pathway and you took your 3 classes and you haven't taken anything comm intensive, well, then we're definitely going to want one of those last 2 classes you have to take to be comm intensive. So the last 2 can be a lot of different things, but basically they're a way to wrap up any requirements you haven't already hit. They could be a way to broach a minor. Otherwise, they can just be kind of for your interests. Do I recommend double majoring? So, good question. And I know this is going to be like unsatisfying to hear so many times, but the answer is it depends. So I would say a big thing with double majors is not fall into the trap of thinking that double is better. I think coming out of high school, a lot of people assume that like, oh, well, if I have 2 majors and 3 minors, then that's automatically makes me look better than someone who has 1 major and no minors. And that's not necessarily true. It's about what your goals are and the whole package, right? So if you have a dual and you can tell a coherent narrative to a recruiter about why, then I'm all about it. Like, for example, with computer systems and computer science. A lot of those students will go to a recruiter and be like, hey, like, I love working with computers and I want to be able to understand both the hardware and the software side of things. Easy sell. With things like electrical and computer systems, it could always be, again, it's about the spin for your goals. You could be like, oh, I really wanted to be an electrical engineer, but I just wanted to have that stronger programming background, and so I did the dual. So think about why you want to do it, and then also think about the load. So again, with those official duals I've talked about, like electrical and computer systems, those generally are going to be pretty reasonable course load. They don't add too much. A lot of the times the departments negotiate so that they're not really adding to your credit load by a lot. So in those cases, it's definitely a lot less intimidating. Where I would caution you more is if you're trying to come up with something totally wacky, like electrical engineering and chemical engineering, those curriculum aren't going to overlap almost at all. So to get that done, you would have to be overloading like crazy or staying extra semesters and summers, which is not to say that you can't do that, right? But then it becomes a bigger conversation of why are we doing this and what are we willing to do to get there? For those more established duals, there's a much smaller mountain to get over. For more unusual ones, you might see something else. So again, double major, it depends. If it fits your goals, I'm all about it. Then the latest AP scores haven't come out. So how do we know if we can start? Good question. I meant to actually touch on this, so thank you for reminding me. So my recommendation is use your best judgment. So as you all know, you need to get 5s on AP exams to get credit at RPI. So obviously a 5 represents a pretty high level of understanding. So my sense is if you feel at least like 50% sure, 50% chance that you are going to get the credit you took the exam for, roll with it. So if you think there's at least a 50% shot you have credit for Calculus 1, go ahead and sign up for Calculus 2. If you walked out of that exam and you were basically like, I would need a miracle to get the 5, then maybe assume no for now. Now, the beauty of this is it's very low stakes if you guess wrong, because registration is going to be open for days for the first wave. And then generally what's happened, we'll see if they change anything this year, is they close registration for like late summer, like late July, early August. And then before you all begin classes again, usually about 1 to 2 weeks before classes start, they're going to reopen it another time. And it stays open through the first 2 weeks of the semester, which is what we call the add drop period. So during those times, you have infinite chances to adjust your schedule. So if you thought you had credit for Calculus 1 and you found out you didn't, you could always switch back to it later. And this even goes for once you're in the class. So I know this is kind of deviating from the AP score question, but let's say you ran with your AP scores, you did get Calc 1 credit, and you started taking Calc 2, and then the first week you're like, okay, like this is over my head and I think I need to go back to Calc 1 to feel ready. Those kinds of changes can happen as well. So go with your gut on APs. And again, just know that if you like make a mistake, so to speak, we will have time to adjust that, whether it's right away, depending on where your time ticket falls with the score release, or we could always do it before your semester starts. Let's see. I took an AP class, but I didn't take the AP exam. So in this case, I took Calc 1 AB, but I didn't take the exam. Well, I need to sign up for Calculus 1, or can I go to Calc 2? Good question. So I could give you the simplified answer, but I trust you all can understand the complicated one. So if you don't have credit for Calculus 1, that's technically where you're supposed to start. Every year we have people who assume they had AP credit, they were wrong, they start in Calc 2, and then they never change it back to Calc 1. So in those cases, you'd have 2 options. So one is that you can go back and take Calc 1 in a future semester, take Calc 1 as a senior if you really wanted to, or you could go on to an additional, more advanced math class, because basically, no matter what, even if you're like quote unquote skipping Calc 1 because you don't have credit, you still have to have the same number of math credits at graduation to be clear. So again, that can be accomplished by either just taking Calc 1 as like an easy GPA boost later on, or you could plan to take a more advanced math class later to make sure your credits come out square. These are really good questions, guys. Keep them coming. Ooh, so I'm looking at the Haas pathways, and there are a couple of classes listed that I want to know more about. I'm trying to find information on the fall 2020 classes. However, I don't see the class I'm looking for on that page. Does that mean this course is not available in the fall? Good question, and the answer is probably yes. So if you want to just be doubly sure of what classes are going to be offered for Haas this fall, you can always just go double check in SIS. So mine is going to look a little bit different from yours because I'm a staff member, obviously, but the class search should be enough to illustrate. So if there is an IHSS that you wanted to see if it's offered in the fall, I know I just clicked through that lightning fast. If you go to class search, fall of 2020, and then scroll down to interdisciplinary HNSS, that's where you're going to see the IHSS classes. This will take you to all of the ones offered for fall. Also, another popular question I've got, don't panic, is why all of these are zeroed out. So just to kind of let you guys know why, this is part of how they block upperclassmen from swooping in and taking the seats before you've even had a chance to show up. So they will be populating seats into these classes before you all register. So just quick heads up there. And then let me see, RPI House inquiry. Sometimes, ooh, yes. All right. Turns out they have been ahead of the game this year and already have posted the spring 2021 courses. So if there is a Haas inquiry class that you want to take for your pathway and it's not listed for this fall, you can check this here and see if it's scheduled for spring. So definitely give that a look. Again, some things do change every year. So if you don't see the class on the list offered this whole year, then that might be a bummer and you might have to find a different one. But there is the list available for both fall and spring, so you'll be able to cross-check both, which is nice. Anything else? Again, I'll give some typing time because I know sometimes it takes a little bit. I'll give it like another 10 seconds. Okay, so if a question comes in while I'm talking, I will address it, but it looks like we're out of questions for now. So if you have any others coming up between now and registration, please don't hesitate to reach out. The Institute is closed on Friday, but I am around all day for Wednesday and Thursday, and we'll be right back at it on Monday. So I'm more than happy to help if you have questions. If you'd rather just set up a one-on-one appointment with me to talk through everything, that's absolutely fine. On the Hub website in the signature block in my email, you'll be able to find the appointment booking link. So always open to that at any time. And it looks like we have one last minute question, so let's make sure we hit it. So let's see. If I plan to take classes online, are all classes going to support online students? Yes, good question. So as I'm sure you all know, things have been wild in the world for a few months now, and things are consistently evolving, and I would say that's still true for RPI. However, there will be a town hall tomorrow that the president is hosting, the RPI president, at noon, and I would highly recommend tuning in. I can definitely say as a staff member, that's our main source of information. So if you watch that, you'll be just about as in the loop as anybody. From what we've seen, all classes will be made accessible online because, first of all, we recognize that there are students who may not be able to get to campus through no fault of their own, whether it's travel restrictions or what have you. And then also, as you would know if you saw the town hall, and you could always watch tomorrow, a big part of the safety plan for the fall is the ability to isolate if people test positive or are related to someone who does and need to quarantine. They still need to be able to take their classes. So all faculty have been told to make all classes available remotely. So big yes. Good. Again, I'll give a few more seconds in case of anything. Going back to my little spiel, if you want to book an appointment with me, that's more than fine. And then it seems like we had a lot of really great Haas questions. So again, I referenced in the guide, there was a link to the Haas webinar schedule where you can hear from the Haas Hub themselves, and all they'll be talking about is just those Haas requirements, and it's a great chance to really dive in and ask questions there too. And then again, you could always direct those questions to me if you would like to. So with that being said, I think we're at the end here. So I wanted to say thank you to all of you for joining me, whether it's at night for most of you in America, or maybe some ungodly hour of the morning for those of you in other time zones. I really look forward to working with you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your summer. Have a great night.